While documenting a nearly lost mountain cemetery, the grave historian discovers a handwritten burial ledger that updates itself in real time, quietly pulling the living into the same record as the dead. I get messages like this more than you'd think. Not the polite ones either. Not the "hello sir, I love your channel" kind. This was a blunt little thing, dropped in my inbox around 10:30 at night. Cemetery on Huckleberry Ridge. No sign, no map. Names ain't right. You'll like it. That was it. No emojis, no location pin, no explanation. Which is how you know it's either a prank or the good stuff. Now, I don't chase every rumor with 2 legs and a heartbeat, but there are certain phrases that get my attention. Names ain't right. That'll do it. Because a cemetery is a record, a public one, even if it's on private land. The names don't match the story folks have been telling for 100 years. It just means something got buried twice, or something never stayed buried at all. So I wrote the tipster back, "Where's the turnoff?" They replied before I could set my phone down. Marker tree, 3 trunks grown together. If you hit the old rock spring house, you went too far. That was so specific, it had to be true, or deranged. Sometimes those two are cousins. I grabbed my gear, checked my batteries, and told myself I'd go at first light, because I'm a grown man with bills and common sense. I went at first light, but not by much. The next morning was cold enough to make your joints argue with you. That kind of Carolina winter morning where the sun is up, but the warmth is still negotiating. Took the backroads out past the last gas station that still sells fried bologna biscuits wrapped in foil. You know the type. The further I went, the more the world thinned out. Fewer mailboxes, fewer tire tracks, more trees that looked like they'd been minding their own business since before your family arrived. Then I saw it. 3 trunks grown together, exactly like the message said. A strange little knot of hardwood, braided like a fist. I pulled off on the shoulder that was more red clay than road, cut the engine and listened. If you spent time in the woods, you know when a place is loud with life, birds, wind, little scuffles in the brush. This wasn't that. This was quiet in a way that felt supervised. Like the hill was waiting on me to step wrong so it could file paperwork. I hiked uphill with my camera bag bumping my hip, frost in the shade, dead leaves slick under my boots. Then I saw the spring house, old stone, half collapsed, like it'd given up long ago on being useful, but stayed out of spite. Good sign I hadn't gone too far. Turned back toward the ridge and spotted something that looked like a path, only if you wanted it to be. 2 faint ruts and a line of crushed leaves. And right there, half buried in the slope, was a board, a plank, weathered, flat on the ground, then another, and another. I stopped, because I've heard enough old mountain stories to know what that means. That's a pallbearer's road, a way to keep men from sliding backward while carrying somebody who isn't complaining anymore. I muttered to myself, "All right, that's new." And I kept a-climbing. The ridge opened up like a breath, not a big clearing, just enough space for light to find the ground. Maybe 20 headstones total, some upright, some sunken low like they were tired. A split rail fence leaned around the perimeter, more tradition than protection, and there was a big oak in the center that looked older than half the state. I did my usual routine, wide shots first, then a slow walk. I read the stones out loud. That's because I know how to keep the story honest, even when the story doesn't want to be honest back. Names I recognized from the region, old families, dates that made sense, 1800s, early 1900s. Then I found the first odd one. A plain fieldstone, no carving, just a notch cut in the top like a tally mark. Beside it, a newer marker, concrete, roughly poured. It read, Unknown, 1973. No first name, no last name, no scripture. That ain't impossible, but it's rare up here. Mountain communities tend to know their own. I got a close-up and made a note, and that's when I saw the box. A wooden box, tucked against the oak's roots, the kind you'd store tools in, or letters, or things you don't want rain to argue with. It wasn't chained, wasn't locked. It was just sitting there like it'd been waiting on me specifically, which is always adorable. I opened it. Inside was a book, not a Bible, not a hymnal, a ledger. Brown cover, faded stamp on the front. Huckleberry Ridge burial record. I stood there a second too long, because you don't usually find records like that unattended, not unless somebody wants you to. I flipped to the middle, handwriting, neat and old-fashioned. Columns for name, date of death, plot location, and notes. At first it looked normal. Then I saw a familiar surname. It's been in these parts forever. The Carters. Their stones were right here. I'd already filmed them. But the ledger listed an extra Carter. Carter, Eliza May, died 1911. Notes, returned. Returned. Not reinterred, not moved, not buried elsewhere. Returned. Turned the pages, saw other entries with the same note. Returned. 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 I'll be honest, I laughed once, a short little puff of disbelief, because sometimes that's the only sensible response to nonsense. I checked the back of the ledger. Dates went all the way up to 1998, then stopped. Like the story ended, except the ink on the last page didn't look old. It looked fresh. I touched it with a thumb, just a faint smear. My stomach did that slow drop thing it does when my brain is trying to be polite about panic. So I did what any respectful historian would do. I set the book on the oak root and started filming it. Because if something weird is happening to you in the wilderness, you might as well get content. I read the last entry out loud. Henson, Clyde, died 1998. Notes, none. Then I joked, quietly to nobody. Well, all right, Clyde, you're the end of the road. I lifted the page to close the book and stopped, because there was a blank underneath Clyde. Not yellow paper, not empty in the old way, empty like it was waiting. I stared at that line for a good 10 seconds, then I looked around the cemetery. No one else there, no vehicles, no footsteps in the forest. Just me and the dead and my questionable decision-making. I told myself the rational thing. Maybe the tipster left this here. Maybe this is some family prop for a local legend. Then the wind slid through the fence, and I heard a soft click from the box. And when I looked back down at the ledger, there was ink on that black line. I leaned closer. The handwriting matched the rest. Line, died, notes, approaching. No name, no date, just that word, approaching. I whispered, okay, that's enough of that. And I shut the book. I packed my gear fast. I'm not embarrassed to say that. There's courage, and then there's volunteering to be a cautionary tale. I started down the plank path, only I didn't get far before I noticed something wrong. The boards weren't where they were before. Not dramatically, not like a cartoon, just shifted. 2 inches here, a foot there, like the path was slowly rearranging itself while I wasn't looking. I knelt down, touched the dirt, fresh scuffs, as if something had been dragged across the hill. I stood up real slow, and that's when I heard footsteps behind me. Not loud, but measured. Old man pace. I turned, nobody there. Just the oak at the top of the ridge, the fence, the stones. Then I heard it again, this time from my left. I did the thing you're not supposed to do in horror stories. I said out loud, "Who's up there?" No answer, but the woods started singing, not birds, not wind, that low humming vibration you sometimes hear when a distant truck is rolling down a back road, except there was no road up here, and the hum was coming from the ground. I kept moving, because if the mountain wants to hum at me, it can do it without my participation. I made it to the spring house before the lights started changing. Thick gray cloud cover slid in out of nowhere, turning morning into late afternoon. That's normal to hear in the mountains. What wasn't normal was what I found by the stone wall. Another box, smaller, newer wood, and inside it, another ledger. This one stamped "Back Road Recovery Log." I frowned so hard my face nearly filed a complaint. I opened it. Right there on the first page, "The Grave Historian." Not my real name, not a guess, my channel name. Listed like a legal identity. Then a note underneath. Arrived 10:58 a.m. Warned 11:12 a.m. Denied 11:26 a.m. I checked my watch, 11:24. I stood there perfectly still holding the book that was 2 minutes ahead of me, and I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean written record that was predicting my next breath. I flipped the page. There was a line waiting. Outcome. I closed the book so hard the cover slapped my palm. Absolutely not. I turned around, and there on the trail was the tipster. At least I think it was. A man-shaped figure in an old coat, hat low, face hidden. He stood in the shade like shadows were paying him rent. I couldn't see his eyes, but I knew he was looking at me. He lifted a hand and pointed uphill, back toward the cemetery. Then he spoke, soft and flat. "You opened the wrong record first." I said, "What does that even mean?" He didn't answer. He just walked into the woods and vanished like he'd been swallowed by the tree line, which is rude. I'm not proud of going back up there, but curiosity is a sickness, and apparently I've not been vaccinated. When I reached the cemetery again, the air felt heavier. Oak's branches didn't move, even though the wind was running through everything else. I walked straight to the root where I'd found the first ledger. The box was still there. I opened it. The book was open to the last page, and the blank line wasn't blank anymore. It had a new name now. Not mine, but a name I recognized. Clyde Henson's grandson, a local guy. I'd seen his name in county records before. A man who went missing in the late 1990s and was never officially found. The ledger listed him as returned. I swallowed, because that's when I got it. This wasn't just a record of who was buried here. It was a record of who belonged here, who the hill had decided to keep. I backed up until my boot hit a stone. I looked down. A marker I hadn't seen earlier, freshly cleaned, almost bright against the older, darker stones, and carved into it was a date. Not 1800s, not 1900s. 2025. This year. No name yet, just room. I laughed again, because my brain is still trying to be polite, but the laughter died fast. Because the ledger scratched, I heard the sound of pen on paper, right behind me. I turned, nobody there. The book was writing itself. I stepped closer. A new entry formed slowly, letter by letter. Historian. The grave. Died. Notes approaching. I said real calm, like that would help. Nope. Picked up my gear and walked out. Not ran. Walked. Because if you sprint out of a haunted cemetery, you look like you're losing an argument. I was losing an argument, but I didn't want it on record. The plank path was longer this time. I don't know how to explain that without sounding like a man who's been sniffing old headstones for too long. But it felt like the hill had grown, like the cemetery was stretching the distance the same way a cat stretches after a nap. I reached the bottom and found something that made my throat tighten. A single board laid across the trail like a threshold. Fresh wood, not weathered, still pale. Carved into it with a pocket knife hand. Returned is a kind word for staying. I stepped over it, because what else do you do? Then I heard the oak again, not the hum, a different sound, like a count. Soft taps. 1, 2, 3. I kept walking. 4, 5, 6. I didn't look back, because I was pretty sure what I'd see. Not a ghost, not a creature, just the fence, the stones, and that ledger writing my story like I'd already agreed to it. I got home, dumped my gear on the floor, and I did what I always do. Started backing up footage. The cliffs looked normal, beautiful even. Frost on stone, that lonely oak, the plank path. Then I played the audio from the ledger shot, and I heard something I didn't notice on the ridge. A whisper under my voice, not a clear sentence, just 3 words repeated like a hymn. Write him in. I almost deleted it. Almost. But I'm a content man, so I cleaned up the audio just enough to make it usable, cut the video into a rough timeline, and scheduled it for next week. Because I'm not immune to bad decisions either. That night, around 1:40 a.m., my phone buzzed. A notification. A new message from an account with no profile picture, just a username. Huckleberry Ridge log. The message was 1 line. Entry acknowledged. I blocked the account. Then another message came in. Different account. Same words. Then another. Then another. I opened my laptop, searched my channel name, and found something that wasn't there before. A brand new page. Plain, black text, a list of names, dates, notes. At the top, Huckleberry Ridge burial record. And halfway down the page, the grave historian. Notes. Approaching. I shut the laptop, sat in the dark, and finally admitted the obvious. Some cemeteries are memories, some warnings, and some are hungry enough to learn new tricks. If that ridge can keep a record, so can the internet. And buddy, the internet never forgets. I'm still going to film old graveyards, still going to chase history down muddy roads. That's what I do. But I'm telling you this like I tell my own people. If you find a cemetery that keeps its own books, don't open the first one you see. And if you see the word returned written where it doesn't belong, leave. Because some places don't want you dead. They just want you documented. And once you're on the record, you're halfway home. If this story hits you the way cold fog hits a ridge road, do me a favor, like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment with the creepiest cemetery rule you've ever heard. And if you want more backroad history with a shadow on it, stick around. I got plenty of places that don't want their names read out loud.